So we're coming today into looking at a few aspects that I think it's fair to say that they're often used rather pejoratively as a term. So these terms that we're going to look at today are chaos, doubt, and ambivalence. And for me, I think it's important that we really open or allow these experiences to be present. In fact, I think they're really vital aspects of a healthy Sangha. To recognise that these are not something that we have to feel uncomfortable about, avoid, move away from. Actually, they're very important qualities for really allowing change and transformation to take place. Without them, in a way, we can't grow, we can't mature. But let's just kind of try to bring this into the context of the Triratna system of practice, because I do think it's integral to what we're doing here in the centre. And so just to remind us what the system of practice is and where the various things we've been doing each day fit into our system of practice. So if going back to the beginning of the week, we were looking at story, we were looking at these different qualities of our experience, our kind of behaviour patterns. So we had this sense of the adaptive and the authentic tendencies in our experience. And I was looking at this sense of the mandala being one way to articulate the fact that we really need to include all of these different qualities and bring them into relationship to each other to actually really discover what is the unifying, the kind of heart of those different experiences that we're kind of moving in and out of. And you could see this initial stage of the retreat was very much about integration. So this is the gathering together of all that we are and trying to bring it in relationship to our values, our deepest values. And those we then moved into actually trying to explore what was might be at the heart of that mandala, and talked about these qualities of spaciousness, lucidity, and sensitivity. So you could say that this kind of exploring the heart of the mandala was related to our system of practice where we describe or explore positive emotion. Yesterday, we were looking at the quality of the breath. Really, how do we work with the breath to get the sense of the axis of the vertical axis of earth and sky, but also the horizontal axis of community, and how do we bring those together through the breath? And I saw that yesterday we were really looking at receptivity. I think, all the practice is receptivity, but particularly yesterday, really exploring what it is to open into the breath. And what remains in terms of our system of practice is spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. So we'll come to rebirth tomorrow, hopefully, but today we go into spiritual death. So just to let you know where we're going, this is really the territory that we're looking at by looking at chaos, doubt, and ambivalence. So I think it's probably fair to say that most of us, most of the time, are trying to do something with our experience. We're trying to improve, change the quality of our life, to kind of get somewhere, to become something. This sense of wanting to arrive at a particular experience, a particular state, a particular way of being. And it's that very striving to move in a particular direction that can quite often create our suffering. The suffering that we bring for ourselves and each other is often because we are trying to squeeze ourselves, go in a particular shape which we think is right, which is how it should be, how we should be. And I think it's particularly unfortunate that the spiritual life is something where we can really fall prey to this tyranny of this perspective of feeling we're wanting or needing to get somewhere and be something different. And it's that forcing, trying to kind of not allow the process, the natural process of unfolding of a natural spiritual life, the fact that we're trying to force ourselves in a particular shape, which can unfortunately lead to quite a lot of difficulties in our life. So to try to fit some fantasy of what it should look like, our spiritual life, we're trying to manipulate, filter, banish, sustain particular states, all these things that we play at to try to get it right. And my suggestion is actually, I think that we may, in doing that, we may be actually undermining what we really have, our actual experience. We undermine our trust and faith in our actual experience. So, we talk about spiritual death. What really are we talking about? I think what it means is that the structures that we've put in place to sustain, maintain a certain ego position, that structure begins to break down. So that collapse of our assumptions, our hopes, our collapse of our views, the collapse of those places where we put a particular set of meanings or values onto a particular way of being. When those start to break down, we move into this phase of spiritual death. When we start to withdraw those projections of some infallible authority onto whatever system of belief, of thought we have created, when we withdraw those projections and recognise actually they are flawed, imperfect, not to say they're not useful, but they are not kind of complete in themselves. When we kind of enter that space, we start to break down in the sense of our particular way of being starts to not satisfy, not meet this kind of sense of well-being that we're hoping for. So what we have, Jung talked about it in this way. Jung says, our soul suffering is the pain of those who have tried to content themselves with inadequate or wrong answers to the questions of life. So if we kind of try to kind of make do with a system that isn't actually, doesn't really meet the questions that we're struggling with, then in a way we will create suffering, pain for ourselves. So just to sort of, I suppose, what I'm suggesting by looking at these terms is actually it's completely a natural part of the spiritual life that we need to drop into these phases on occasions. And I'll say a bit more about why that might be helpful. But just to start with the statement that I think that allowing or finding ourselves in these places of chaos, of doubt, of ambivalence, to not judge them as places that somehow are wrong. They're actually quite a natural part of the process and actually a really vital aspect of spiritual growth. So, what does this look like? What does it feel like? What is chaos? So in chaos, what we have is sensations, experiences, ideas and perceptions that are arising in ways that we can't articulate them back to ourselves to fit them into some narrative that we understand, that we can kind of hold them in a way that is acceptable to ourselves. The experiences that are arising are in some way shattering or challenging the framework that we've built around us to kind of maintain a sense of stability, security, etc. Now these sensations, these experiences of starting to open into chaos, they may be quite vague and a bit unformed, but actually the main experience is that something is beginning to become destabilised, something is beginning to break down or open. So it's important to recognise that chaos is only seen as a problem from the position of a fixed view or a position of an existing structure. So if we try to hold or grip into a certain position, when something new breaks in, well, of course, it's challenging, and we describe it then as chaos. But actually all it is something arising in our experience that doesn't fit what we imagine should be there. We can't kind of quite place our experiences in a pre-existing form. So it's all it is, it's a signal that something new is trying to come into the situation. Our limited perspectives can't hold its position, its shape, in the face of what is arising, in the face of the new. And really, chaos is at the heart of any change. We don't change until these new experiences are allowed into our being, until we're starting to be able to open into these new experiences, new sensations. So chaos actually is certainly the real basis for a creative life, a creative, responsive life. Only that which separates us, only that which betrays the familiar, that which pulls the rug from under our feet, that removes us from what we most depended on, only that which enables us to differentiate ego consciousness from the larger whole, is that which also allows us to surrender into the darker mystery surrounding us. So this sense of chaos actually opens us out into a much larger mystery that we are engaging in, that we are actually intimately involved in the whole time. It's just that we kind of keep ourselves out of it by having these structures. So what comes out of this sense of chaos is to recognise that a healthy Sangha is not all smooth and homogenised into a kind of delightful single experience. There has to be in a healthy Sangha, there has to be difference. There has to be even conflicting views to be present, to actually challenge this sense of a kind of preformed structure of what and who we are. The main thing is, going back to the idea of the mandala and integration, it's important that different parts of the Sangha, the different parts of our own experience, these new parts of our experience that are coming into our life, they are held in dialogue to the whole. So this is why the mandala is so important. If we get lost in one new piece of information that comes in, to some extent that can be become over-identified with that, and that then sucks us, draws us away down a path which may be not particularly fruitful. So it's trying to hold that larger perspective that we talked about, we have been talking about, of this open spaciousness, to hold that which is emerging, coming into our experience, so that we can actually engage with chaos and bring it into relationship to the pre-existing forms. So chaos we can experience as really raw, unmediated experience, sometimes transgressive, sometimes unbounded. It's certainly dangerous to existing ego structures of individuals and of institutions. So it's something that we really need to be alive to actually see how important it is to bring this sort of sustaining life force into ourselves and into community. What chaos is really doing is allowing the world to speak. Chaos is when something new comes into our experience from the world, from larger soul of the world, or the psyche, as being something beyond us that we are connected to, that we pretend to understand, that we pretend to understand what we're doing and our relationship to these greater forces that are playing into and through our lives. So that's probably enough on chaos, but I need to talk a bit about the other two. So I'm just going to say a little bit about doubt now. So one of the interesting things about doubt is that we can imagine that it's our fault, our problem, that we're experiencing some doubt, when actually it might be that we're simply seeing through a limited view of another. So it's quite hard to kind of stay with what is true for us. So we can imagine that we're at fault. And I think this is one of the real tragedies of this quality, is that because we see doubt as being, usually it's seen as something not, well, again, we have, just like chaos, doubt is also has quite a bad press most of the time. So actually to turn that around, flip that around, to say, well, why are we having these thoughts, these questions? Why are we challenging the status quo in this way? And recognising actually to honour that, well, we may actually have something here that's important and valuable, that our perception actually might be true, and to be able to hold on to that. So we work against exploring what is the nature of the doubt, rather than just turning it into something where we are wrong. So what does doubt serve? What is it kind of trying to draw out of the situation? So really, doubt is encouraging us to really look deeper into what are our values. What is it that we know is true and right? It really helps to clarify our deeper values. It means that we challenge norms, we challenge unspoken rules and agendas, which we often can be unconscious of. So I think it's a very important aspect of spiritual practice to allow or to honour doubt if it becomes present. So in terms of Sangha, what it does is it really helps us to create conversations amongst us. It encourages us to have dialogue around our differences. So it encourages our capacity to actually question and challenge views. Another quote. We might say that the cornerstone of our uniqueness and our fate is always that which tends to be despised and rejected, either by ourselves or by our culture. Or the realization of our being depends on precisely that which we might overlook, the things that look all wrong, that doesn't, as it were, measure up or feel at home, may be the part that refuses to become domesticated. So this sense of the cornerstone is perhaps that yearning, whether we know it or not, that takes us away from everything familiar and sets us on a search that longs for us to differentiate from the collective values into which we are born, those forces that can threaten the gem of our uniqueness, even our divine calling. So we don't often use the word divine here, but hopefully you can listen to that, hear that poetically. So what it's saying is that doubt could be the very thing that is highlighting our own unique knowing, our own unique value system, and how easily we can find ourselves becoming domesticated in that sense of sort of trained to accept the norms and accept things as they are, which can be so limiting and destructive for us. The last thing I'll just say a little bit about is ambivalence. So I don't know, I kind of certainly find this is alive in me some of the time. Hopefully it is in you. It's, it feels again it's something that's important to just sort of kind of find a relationship to, really. So I think for me it comes back to this idea of the mandala. So ambivalence is an oscillating between different positions, different experiences within ourselves, and being kind of swung between these poles. And ambivalence, I guess, is something about the capacity to actually hold those oscillations, to be kind of aware, alive to them, without being kind of dismissing one end of the pole. So for me, the sort of one of the clearest poles or oscillations that I move between is faith and doubt. That I really can get behind on occasions with, this is the Dharma life is actually really precious and really important to me, and I can see how it transforms me and others. It's fantastic. And then on other occasions, what are we doing? What are we up to? Is this some sort of fantasy that is just kind of, we're just deluded in our imagining that we can somehow mature and grow into more kind of loving, compassionate beings. So to allow those two kind of poles to be present, it means again we don't have to demonise or look at in a sort of negative way this experience. It's actually the capacity to start be allowing us to build a sort of a wider self-knowledge of what and who we are, what is driving us, and hold it in this in relationship. So for Sangha, what it mainly does is it works to build relationship rather than certainty. It simply encourages us to come into relationship. It allows us to be here. We don't have to go off just because we happen to feel a particular way on a particular day. We can stay here stay in relationship. Because ambivalence to me is very much an inclusive sensation. It's the capacity to hold these different parts of our experience. So ambivalence is actually very inclusive, and it allows for our fluctuating inner experience to be acceptable for us, but also hopefully acceptable for the community. We don't need to try to compete with each other or the situation to get one supreme position, the truth, or the experience that one has to have. So in a way, ambivalence leans back into integration. And it moves us away again from this tyranny of the fantasy of a singular ego-born structure, that we are just a single being. Because any of us who are looking to our experience for 2 minutes will recognise the extent that we are fluid. We are becoming and experience different qualities of being moment to moment. And to not to sort of grip onto one particular mode, I think is very important. So it really comes back to these three qualities that I've been talking about this morning. It comes back to the traditional teaching of the three fetters, where we started earlier in the week. These capacity of chaos to really dissolve a fixed self-view. So if we really enter into chaos fully, we are breaking the first fetter of fixed self-view. And if we can really dissolve doubt, in the sense of the doubt in a limited perspective, an ego perspective, if we can let go of that, hold doubt in a more positive way of seeing it as a way that it's actually, again, it's starting to question and challenge and open, creates a more fluidity in our life, then we really will be working to dissolve the second fetter, the fetter of doubt, in the sense of this unable to really commit ourselves to the path. And ambivalence, I'd say, is connected to the third fetter, this fetter of reliance on rites and rituals, to feel that things have to be a particular way to be fruitful, we literalise our engagement with the spiritual life. So to allow ambivalence, it really softens our relationship to meditation, to devotional practices. So this is why, for me, I think that these three qualities of chaos, doubt and ambivalence are so crucial for a healthy Sangha.